Well, welcome. Today, I am going to be speaking to women. I think men will could benefit from the conversation, but this is the second half of a conversation that I began um, 2 sessions ago. In the first 2 sessions, I spoke about how to make for yourself a successful um, experience in relationships. And in the first session, I spoke to young girls between age 12 and 17. Second session followed with the same age group, but my target was to young boys. Now, I'm quite excited because this is when I believe that I have the freedom to speak more directly, because I am going to be focusing on those who are age 18 and above. But my target group specifically for both sexes is 18 to 35. You are an adult if you fall within this group. Now, if you are 35, I'm sure you will find the interaction to be also very valuable. But once you get to 18, you are legally an adult, and therefore the choices you make fall on your shoulders. I feel more comfortable speaking to this group because it's never my intention to undermine the directions or the teachings, the philosophies, the family codes that a parent has already given a child. So my initial reaction for younger people below 18 is always to refer you back to your parents for advice. 18 and above, this is where you start to forge for yourself an identity, an image that is somewhat distinct, different from your upbringing, but I would hope not too dissimilar to your upbringing. Now let's get things started. I'd like to say before we go further that the conversations that will follow, both for men and women going forward, will be rather direct. So if you are soft at heart and easily irritated and do not have any appetite for learning, if you are woke, soft, if you're a snowflake, then you might find some of the things I share to be, I guess, not up your street. You can exit at any time. You can always return also at any time. You can leave, you can come back if you wish, you can choose not to come back, or you can stay. Now, with that disclaimer, let me start as follows. For young women, 18 and above, I'd like you to think about the possibility that everything you know and every knowledge you have with regards to relationships are not necessarily to your long-term best interest. That there are certain things and ideas and ideologies and, you might say, standards, principles that you have acquired that will not hold you in good stead on a long-term basis. They will not enable you to achieve success to the manner or in the manner that you expect. A lot of what you already know is wrong. If you can accept that statement, what it does is it frees you of the internal battle that you will experience as I share some of these ideas. You see, what we do as human beings, when we interact with other people, we tend to find and look for people who have similar values and similar beliefs, similar biases, similar aspirations, because we like safety. And for many years in the modern West, the concept of idea meritocracy has disappeared. We've become so deceitful, both implicitly and explicitly. Truth has been pushed out of the picture because we do not want to upset how people feel. Meaningful relationships are therefore no longer anchored on radical honesty and truthfulness with the intent to help each other grow. What you will get from me and hear from me are things that I believe could help you. Now understand that you can learn in two ways. You can learn from your mistakes, or you can learn from other people's experience. You can combine both, which is a strategy that usually works. I said in one of the many sessions that I did weeks ago, the challenge that most people have, the problem we face, the reason we suffer, in actual fact, across the whole world, what we have is a problem of ignorance. We lack awareness because we do not study, and because we do not study and have no appetite for study, we do not seek information. We have a wisdom problem. Wisdom unlocks the doors to the aspirations that you might have, the desires that you might have. So you can be doing the same thing every single day and making very little progress. Don't confuse activity for productivity in relationships. You need to be picking up pace and picking up speed rather than going round and around in a circle. So, if you can start with the first of the lessons of today, which is a lot of what you already know, the ideas you already have about relationships are wrong. If you accept that, the second idea I would love to put across is that if you're happy to open your mind to other ideas, rather than looking to reinforce your pre-existing prejudices and ideas, or rather than looking to reinforce and pound in ideas you already know or agree with, if you're willing to replace that mindset with one that says, I will rather be successful than right. The need to be right, especially for women, perhaps is the Achilles heel for a lot of young women. If you can substitute success and how to be successful, irrespective of the messenger, and perhaps irrespective of how the message is presented, and trade that for the need to be right, then you will find success, sometimes unexpected, in uncommon areas, during uncommon times, and from uncommon people. Now let me give you the third. The third is part of what we will be discussing, and what I'd like you to take to heart is there's something called a life cycle. Best way to describe this would be, think about businesses. A business begins as an idea in someone's head, someone's mind. That idea is translated into a theory. Then it becomes put in words, designed into sometimes a business plan, and eventually becomes what we call a startup. From the period of a startup, we say a business has been conceived. 18 years is synonymous with a startup company. You were young, you were beautiful, you were excited, you were enthused, the world is your oyster, but you have absolutely no history of success, and you're going into the world believing that the knowledge you have will suffice for your success. Like a boat on the sea, you get blown around, and if you're not able to set your sail and you don't have a compass, it's possible, and also if you do not know where your true north is, there's a possibility you end up in the wrong location, wrong destination, which is failure, especially if your destination is defined as success. Now, what this means is, as a business starts, what you find is a business goes through a life cycle. From a startup, it goes into what we call a high growth company, to a mature growth company. It moves into the next phase, which is a stable growth company. Then it becomes a stable, mature company. Then it becomes a stable company where growth is declining. Almost you start to coast. Eventually, you move into what we call full mature company, and then you start to decline. A declining mature company, and then a declining company, and finally, what we call death of a business, because the business runs its entire life cycle out. Now, human beings go through the same thing. Age is how we keep score. Stages of our lives, something I'll discuss next or shortly, is also how we measure the exact position in that cycle. Now, what this means is, as a young person, as a young girl, it's important to have hope, but it's important to temper your hope with wisdom and knowledge and awareness. That way you don't, like the seasons of life, during winter, we do not wear summer clothes during winter, and during summer, we do not wear winter outfits. The reason, we have to adapt with the season. Similarly, you have to adapt with the phase of your life that you find yourself. Unfortunately, the decisions you make, like a seed, they always bear fruit. And what you're looking to do is plant the right seeds, and once you've planted the right seeds, keep the garden tended. So there will be a life cycle in your life, and as you go through the phases, and perhaps this is one of the most important things that I can give you. At 18, the possibility that you will accept everything that I'm sharing is negligible, sadly. But as you approach 35, the possibility that you will take to heart and agree with a lot of what I have said is tremendously high. Now, you might be thinking, what will change? Is this the same person, but a change of heart? Well, the answer is a 4-letter word we call life. You see, when we're young, we think we know it all. We think we are the exceptions to the rule. And as we age, we become aware of the fact that some of the things that we experienced are not new, but we've gone through life like children, not knowing what happened before we were born. These are ideas that have been in existence before I was born. So, number 3, it's important you understand that the early years of your life really matter. And in order for success to come, the decisions you make early will determine the success you will achieve later. Young people make a mistake when dating to believe that all that matters is the present. No, the present is important. The future is who you will grow into becoming. But decisions you make in the present can rob you of that potential future. Decisions you made in the past could also rob you of that future. And let me give you a good example, because this might seem like some positive motivation talk, which it isn't. Assuming you are a lady, a girl, a young woman, and you are heterosexual. You want to have a successful relationship. It's important to understand the opposite sex and how they think. How they think should be calibrated in a language that you understand, so that you can match your actions with the expectations and the standards of other people. You have your actions and your standards. The other party has their actions and their standards. Both parties have to meet in order for there to be mutual exchange, and in order to facilitate long-term success as a couple. You have to understand what they like, what men like. So, for example, a woman's past matters to men. We care about what you have done in the past. Sometimes it's strange, because women do not judge men in the same harsh way. A woman looks more to a man's potential and his future. A man looks more to a woman's present and her past. Two different standards of judgment. Now, the reason I bring this up is simply because what you do in your early years, you cannot dismiss your actions as decisions made as a result of youthful ignorance, because that will not fly. Especially in this day and age of social media and technology and the internet, or everything is stored or recorded, so you have to be careful. Your words matter, your actions matter, your behaviors matter. What you share with the world behind closed doors or in the open matters. So it's important to recognize the early years of your life are important. Now, this brings me to number 4, which is, as a young lady, even as a woman who is older, one of the things I would encourage you to accept, don't make a judgment, just accept it, is that there is a cruelty that nature bears and gifts both men and women. Sometimes you might feel that there is a double standard, and guess what? There is. In certain parts of the relationship dating experience, there are double standards. There are double standards that benefit women, and there are double standards that benefit men. There is no such thing as equality of standards. That is a myth. I would ask you to disavow such thoughts and such beliefs. Sometimes it's good for the goose, sometimes it's good for the gander. If you can accept that and try to recognize where the double standards lie, you reduce the stress, you reduce the aggravation, you reduce the unnecessary expectation, and you simply know how to play the rules of the game. Now, for example, if you were playing golf with me and we got to a particular section of the golf course, and you noticed that the landscape was designed in a certain way, it would be important for you to play in a manner that maximizes or utilizes, you might say, the undulations of the landscape. You can't complain. You just accept what the landscape is and you take it to your advantage and make the best of it. You be fascinated rather than frustrated, which makes life easy. There is a cruelty to nature. Let me share one. Perhaps I should have said this at the start. There is so much to share about the entire topic of dating, especially for women, that I am not going to cover everything in one session. It's not possible. Some of these ideas and thoughts have come from a lifetime of decades of living, failing, studying, observing other people. So it will take more than one session, so keep that in mind. I'll go as far as I can in this session. But to go back to what I was saying about the cruelty, and the double standard that nature hands to women and men. If you understand where those standards are, it means that you can operate and move in a way that allows you to be successful. For example, as a woman ages from about 18, this is a cruel thing to say, because if you have a daughter, it's a cruel thing to say to a daughter. But let me use a good example that perhaps you might remember, and that you might relate to. Now, we lost our beloved Queen Elizabeth, a few months ago, last year, and so today we have a new king, King Charles III. The royal family is a family that is held in esteem by British subjects and people around the world, including those in the Commonwealth. If you're born into the royal family, you were born into wealth. You're born into a class. You're born into a value structure that is given to you by virtue of your birth. Prince Williams was given his value, whatever that value is determined to be, at birth. The idea that he was born William, the heir to King Charles, at birth, or the heir to the throne at some stage, meant that he came with all of his value handed to him. It would be the same as someone paying into your account all of the money you would need for your entire lifetime is given to you. Now, if he had been born into another family, rather than the Windsor family, but he was born into, let's assume, in this particular instance, the Gaylord family, for example, as a peasant, he still would have been William, but William Gaylord. Unfortunately, he would have been under a different standard. He would have had to earn his value because he would have been born, like most people, with nothing. And he would have to go out to the world and make something of value that the world wants, and exchange what he has produced at a fair rate, a price that the world is willing to exchange some level of compensation for. In other words, had he been born into another family, he would have had to create his value. That process of creating his value takes years and decades, and sometimes even up to 2 decades, from age 18. Now, prior to 18, it's even worse. Women are like the women born into the royal family and the men born into the royal family. They come with an inherent value. Now, I'm talking about relationships. So you have to understand that in the relationship marketplace, a woman's value is given to her. And the reason is a simple one. What men desire, generally speaking, on first glance, is beauty, attractiveness, youth, fertility, purity, chastity. All of those attributes, if you were to look at all of those attributes, the younger the woman is, the closer you are to 18, assuming you are still a virgin at 18, the more you are the most valuable to most men in the relationship or dating marketplace. It's really that simple. But as you age, like a building, there is deterioration, because in life we are either growing or we are dying. As you age, you start to lose that inherent value. The first thing that men want. Now, there are other things, but from a visual perspective, Men determine that you have more at 18, which is why if you were to poll men from 50 years and below who were single between 18 and 50, you will find that roughly, perhaps, maybe 85 to 87% of the men in that group will tell you that women between 18 and 22, 23 are the most desirable because they have the highest value. Purity, chastity, beauty, youth, attractiveness. So as you age, you lose your value as a woman. In the sexual marketplace, you do not lose your value as an individual in society. You do not lose your value as a person and as a child of the universe. You do not lose your value in terms of the rights you have. You do not lose your value in terms of your ability to earn or economics. This is purely based on sexual attractiveness from a man's perspective. A man, on the other hand, a boy who's 18 is like, you might call it a peasant, born to no name and therefore has to go out to the world and make something of himself. This simply means that he is born with potential but no value, because he has to convert his potential to actual value. It takes him most of the time almost 2 decades before he's at a place where he can afford some of the things that a prince can afford. He can afford a family, he can afford a life, he can have responsibilities met because he has worked long enough, and therefore the market has bestowed upon him a consensus of people who have bestowed on him a value. How that value is measured is slightly different from a woman's. In the sexual marketplace, a woman is measured based on her sexual value. And there are several ways we do this. I will talk about this later. A man is measured based on his resource value, his ability to provide, his ability to protect, his ability to understand, and having failed through life, understand the priestly duties and to profess his love. That comes with age, experience, failure, success, overcoming a multitude of issues. And what you find is as follows. As a man journeys through those stages and fails through life, obstacles, challenges, failures, stress, they build our shoulders. They build us into the men we should be so that we can provide, protect, not nurture, but profess our love and continue to be the priest in the family. Think about a building. Every building you see mostly consists of what we call the superstructure. What is from ground and above? That's what most people see. There is something called the substructure, which is the part of the building that supports the entire superstructure. Men are like the substructure. Husbands are the foundations of the family. Mostly they are not seen, they are not appreciated. People do not walk past and comment on how great they look, but they support the entire family, the entire community, and therefore the entire nation. The journey they go through enables them to have the strength, the mental toughness, the physical toughness to hold as much load as possible. So the younger a man is, and the more he labors to get into manhood, the more he goes through trials and tribulations. Those trials and tribulations build the man. Those trials and tribulations enable him become and enables him form a frame that he will use for the entire rest of his life and his family and his loved ones. The reverse is the case with women. The more trauma, the more stress, the more pain and heartache, the more obstacles a woman goes through. Those experiences, especially when those experiences are emotional, coming from a relationship, psychological, even spiritual, the less she is desirable to men, because whilst trauma, I don't like to use the word, whilst stress and all the, you might say the winds, the headwinds that come our way, build us, they break women down. From a sexual perspective, if you were to meet a young man, it's partly why we think about the Virgin's Prize. Whilst most men do not want virgins, because in the modern West it's not seen as something to be desired, they would still tell you they want someone who's as close to a virgin as possible. The reason being, they want someone who's had less trauma, emotional, relational trauma. So, as a woman, it's important to understand that you should minimize relational trauma, heartbreaks, wrong people in your life, unnecessary exposure to things that will either harm or cause you pain. Avoid all of that too early. Now, this brings me to number 4. Number 4 deals with the stages of a woman's journey. Now, remember, I'm talking about age 18 to 35. There are 4 stages. This is how men think. 18 to 22 is the first 5 years. 23 up to 27 is the second, another 5 years. 28 will take you up to 32, the third of another 5 years. 33 to 35 is the fourth, but 3 years. In total, you have 18 years. 18 years, at which point, nature, going back to number 4, nature starts to show more of its cruelty by closing some doors. I will talk about, and I will use some acronyms very soon, but let me share some of them with you. The first is SMV. Now write that down if you can. The second is RFV. The fourth is NSMV. The fifth is EIV. Now you might be thinking, what on God's good earth are all these acronyms? The first is your sexual marketplace value. Simply means how men judge you based on what they see. It covers all the things I talked about: beauty, attractiveness, youthful, but it's purely visual. And men judge you in certain ways: your face, your height, your weight, very important, your waist to height ratio, your weight to height ratio. So you can have a very pretty face, but have an appalling and an unattractive body, which reduces your overall value. A woman who is beautiful, gorgeous, might have a 9 or a 10 in terms of sexual marketplace value. It's a scaling mechanism from 0 to 10. You might score a 9, for example, but if you're obese, you might have a great face, a face of a 9, but a body of perhaps a 4, 3. That pulls down your overall sexual marketplace value because it combines several things. Your reproductive fertility value, called RFV, is hidden in the name: reproduction and fertility. The younger you are, generally speaking, all things remaining equal, the more you should be able to have higher quality eggs and more quality eggs. Therefore, you have a higher reproductive value the younger you are. Now go back. You have a higher sexual marketplace value the younger you are, and as you age, you lose that value. you have a higher reproductive fertility value the younger you are, and as you age, you lose that value, so much so that at 35, at the end of 35, your obstetrician and gynecologist will tell you that you have now entered high risk pregnancy, where your health, your well-being, and that of the child is at a high risk. Nature starts to show more of its cruelty, effectively shutting down the entire system. For a lot of young women, I should say this, and I know it may not come across as acceptable from a man. Technology has really messed up our biome and our genome from a female lens. So those who start using the pill, those who are raised without fathers, those who are raised in certain modern societies, we find young girls starting puberty even before, sometimes before 12. And unfortunately, nature closes that door rather than 35. For some people it's 34, for some people it's 32. But here is where it's even, I guess, a lot more painful. Menopause is occurring much sooner. Now you might call it environmental, social, doesn't matter what the reasons are. Nature is shutting its door, but also opening its door earlier and shutting it earlier. Now this simply means that, generally speaking, for men who are in the relationship marketplace, but who want to transition to marriage, the purpose for marriage is simply to reproduce and have kids. Otherwise, there is no need. You can get all the benefits outside of marriage as you can inside of marriage. Now, I'm speaking about the modern West. I know in other parts of the world things are still done the right way. If you can get all the benefits and the net benefit is zero in marriage, but you can get all the benefits outside marriage, most people are refusing marriage. So for those who go into marriage, the costs are so great, but most men will take that because they want to reproduce. Having children is perhaps the only reason in the modern West why it would be useful to get married, so that you place the children first and you give them the best opportunity for a successful life. And what this simply means is that men judge based on what they see first, attraction, but then they have to judge by a different metric, which is retention, by the quality of your womb. It comes down to your womb. I hate to say this, but your womb and your womb only. The younger you are, the higher your ability to bring to term, full term, a healthy child, a successful reproduction process where your health and the baby are at the optimal stage, position. The older you get, the higher the risk. So a woman who is 36 is less desirable than a woman who is 22 from a reproduction perspective. Now I should say this because this is perhaps hard to accept also. I agree that a woman who is 32 and 36 is more likely going to be more emotionally mature, secure in herself, aware of her identity, and most likely be a better mother if she waits. I can't explain why, but I know that somehow the biological instinct kicks in your latter years, and suddenly the desire kicks in, whereas at a younger age, most young girls do not want to be mothers, and society has conditioned out of young women the beauty of motherhood, the importance of motherhood, so much so that we do not recognize that motherhood is more important than being a CEO in a Fortune 1,500 company. The idea that we can compare business with motherhood is beyond me. In any case, I'm not making a value judgment in this case because people get to choose. You can do what you want. But society has, in the West, has conditioned a lot of women. Perhaps I shouldn't use the word society. Society doesn't do anything. People do. Ideas do. In any case, your reproductive fertility value matters to men who want to have families and reproduce. Now, NSMV is your non-sexual marketplace value. And this deals with things that are not visual or inherent, such as in you, such as your ability to reproduce. It covers things such as how well you were trained and taught as a woman, the level of your feminine demeanor, spirit, attitude. It has to do with your behavior, your mannerisms, your training, your etiquette. It has to do with your decorum, chastity, how you communicate. It deals with things that are not purely physical. Your traditional values, if any, or your modern values, if every. A man wants a beautiful woman. If he wants a family, he wants a woman who is beautiful, who can bring life into the world for him, extend his genes. But he also wants peace. He wants serenity. And he wants some level of servitude, either for him or towards his offsprings. Peace comes from your non-sexual marketplace value. And this has to do with whether you were trained well as a young girl before 18. The younger you are, the higher that should be. So if you're 18, because you have just come out from home, assuming a two-parent family, then you are fully equipped. You haven't been to college. You haven't actually adulterated all those great teachings. You haven't started listening to all the nonsense, feminism, womanism, and all the woman studies and all the madness. You haven't started listening to politics and debates and all the ideas around the world that dilute the purity of what a loving father and a loving mother instilled in you. The younger you are, the higher your non-sexual marketplace value. Number 4 is your economic intrinsic value. Now, this is where women have, you might say, parity with men. The younger you are, the less economic wealth you have. Your economic intrinsic value deals with education converted to solving problems, converted to creating value, providing services, which is translated to compensation. Compensation comes in the form of money. That money is either saved or invested, and therefore you have a level of wealth. It's economic wealth. The younger the woman is, the less she has, and therefore the lower her economic intrinsic value, just like a man. Therefore, as she ages, all things remaining equal, her economic intrinsic value will increase. But here is perhaps one very sad reality. Generally speaking, there is something called hypogamy, meaning as a woman earns more, she wants a man on the same level as she is or higher. Women date across the social landscape or structure and upwards. Men, on the other hand, will settle for dating in the same economic or social structure, but preferably downwards. In other words, when a man becomes capable, we have an instinctive nature to provide and protect. So we look for people to pair with so that we can provide for them. We prefer women who earn less than we do, not because we're not confident about and holding our position, not because we're not, you might say demasculated by the fact that she earns more. The reason is simply, men are naturally disagreeable. I'm sure you know that already if you are a woman. Go to the football pitch, 5-a-side, basketball pitch, go to the office, even with negotiating pay raises and negotiating things, men are naturally disagreeable. It's part of our makeup, our biology. women are naturally agreeable. In order for a woman to earn a high salary, she needs to play the game in a man's world, which is a game where you might say the gloves are off. She needs some masculine traits if she's going to beat the men in that game. Otherwise, to the victor goes all the spoils. So she develops very masculine traits. Those masculine traits are great for business, but they're not great in relationships, especially for someone who does not know how to, you might say, control and take off the hat when they leave work and move into a feminine role when she's with her loved one. Most women do not know how to do that. So for most men, the feeling is as though you're in bed with another man. It's not that we don't like women who are intelligent and earn much, it's that we just don't like the attitude that comes with it. We prefer peace. A man really likes peace, serenity and peace. We don't want to get into mortal combats, verbally or physically with you. We do that in the real world. We go out and we try to slay the dragon, we bring home the bacon. We don't want to be measuring dicks in the same house, especially when you do not have one. It's your attitude and not your achievements. That is the reason why most men do not take a liking to women who earn a lot of money, or because there's almost a competition. Remember, women want to date across and above. Men prefer to date horizontally and downwards. So what you find is, as a woman earns more, because she wants a man who earns just as she does or above, the quantity in the pool of men starts to shrink. You start looking at what we call the 80-20 principle, Pareto principle, where 20% of the men are being desired by almost 100% of the women, which means the competition for women as she earns more is steeper. In other words, you become the victim of your own success if you are a woman, especially if you try to find a man when you have achieved that success. Now, if you started with nothing, and both of you started with nothing, and you grew, that's perfectly fine. But if you grew but remained feminine in your non-sexual marketplace value, then that's perfectly fine. Remember, men are judging you in 3 ways: SMV, RFV, and SMV. We don't care about your EIV. We really do not care. Especially any man who understands the masculine call to adventure and who has a masculine frame and understands what a man is supposed to do, which is to provide for his family, to protect his family, to love his family, and to devote himself to his family. We understand that responsibility. We do not care about what you make. We really don't. Here's something interesting. I'll use myself. Anecdotal as it may be. I have never asked a woman in my entire life what she earns. I never cared. I never will. Because it plays no relevance in my responsibilities, my duties, and my obligation to a relationship and in a relationship. Don't care. That feeling is the same. Now, if you have been, unfortunately, you found a man who was feminized and is a beta male and has been taught into this BS, then yes, perhaps if he cannot compete and if he doesn't like to work hard and if he doesn't understand the obligation he has to the family and to you, he might be okay with a 50-50 arrangement. Now, good luck with that. But that's your choice. In any case, the point I was trying to make is that if you were to go back to the 4 stages that I explained, 18 to 22, 22 to 27, 28 to 32, 32 to 35, something interesting happens. I cannot go into the detail, but as you transition from one phase to another, all on every single hierarchy of measurement, a woman's value starts to decline. So go back to the cruelty of nature, the most important decisions a woman has to make with regards to her long-term success in relationships have to be made when she has the most value, which means the younger she is. The later she leaves that decision, the less desirable she becomes to men who are in the same marketplace. You have to think long-term, not short-term. You see, when we lived, if you go back to pre-1940s, the life expectancy was 45, between 40 and 45 years. The average age for marriage was about 25. So most people lived, at best, 20 extra years. At 40, 45, you were dead. So there wasn't time for people to bicker and fight because life was all about survival. It's partly why the generation that we call the Great Generation and the Silent Generation are still revered, because they were incredible people. They laid the foundation of everything we have today. The reason I use that is simply because the life expectancy for women today and men is between 80 and 85 years, women being roughly 85 years. Unfortunately, for many, some might argue fortunately for some, the average age of marriage for women in the UK is 35 years. Women are getting married right on the dot of geriatric pregnancy. The difference is they would live another 50 years. So at the point where your sexual marketplace value is almost what I call empty, your reproductive fertility value is empty, your non-sexual marketplace value is eroded, but you're earning much more, economic intrinsic value is high, women are making decisions at that stage about relationships. Too little, too late. What that simply means is that most women will not be eligible to the most attractive men that they believe and they assign value to, because those men will be looking for younger women so that it's an equal exchange. A man who is 40 and a woman who is 36, that's unequal. Why? The man is judged on his resources, but the woman is judged based on her beauty, her fertility, her youth, her chastity, and the decorum, attitude that comes with her. At 40, he might be looking for a younger woman who is 27, 26, 25, who even knows even younger. So a woman has to play a game where she understands, like when you play in a casino, a time comes when you have to take all the chips away from the table and say, I've won. I've done enough. My chips, my stakes are high. It's time to go away. If you keep playing, you end up losing your hand. Now this brings me to number 6. And in many ways I have alluded to number 6, which is the requirement for women to understand what men want. Now across this 4 stages, what men want will vary depending on the stage of a man's life. Let me say this because I think it's important. It is not my intention is not to cause any unnecessary, aggravation. If for some reason you find yourself on the losing side of the age distribution. But I'll say this, if you were to ask me my preference, with the exception of 1 or 2 things, I would choose 27 as the time period when a woman, who is a modern woman, who decides that she wants to further her education, start a career, and make something of herself. 27 is the time when I say that decision has to be made. In other words, you've played in the first stage, 18 to 22. You've allowed yourself and dedicated the second stage to yourself, 23 to 27. But towards the end of 27, that's when you should be deciding, I've got to pull my chips away from the table. if you want a relationship, a meaningful, significant relationship, you've got to do a deal. You've got to take yourself out of the marketplace, because it gets worse. That said, if I was advising a man, I would say you should focus on finding a younger woman, but there are some, you might say, qualifications. I do not necessarily want younger women 18 to 22 getting married, in my preference. The reason being is that, except you come from a family of wealth, or a family where your parents have invested in you, or you've been conditioned to recognize that your education and your career do not have to precede childbearing. In other words, you can do that post 35 and even post 37, 40, when you've got, effectively, you've taken all the chips off the table and you've kept big. Once that phase is done, then you can become the career woman, because at that point your kids are grown, they're out of the house, and you and your partner can go right into work, so you have a sense of meaning. It means not only do you become a mother and a good mother, you also become a businesswoman, an entrepreneur. You become a career woman, and you have another, what I call a second wind, a second phase. You reinvent yourself and life becomes meaningful. At 40, you're rocking, you're kicking ass. You've just gone through education. And here's the key thing, perhaps an important statement. The knowledge you've acquired and all those sacrifices are not wasted. Let me share another anecdotal experience. I think you'll find this interesting. Without exception, every woman I have met, doesn't matter her level of education, her level of sophistication, her intellect, every woman who I have met, and when I use the word met, I mean either dated or been intimate with, has told me, perhaps within the first 2 days of meeting me or of us going for the first date, that they have no intentions of working, that they are very happy. Let me use the word, to be ladies of leisure. That's a better word. Rather than say housewife, ladies of leisure. Now, at the time, these women, I wasn't going to have kids. So it was out of the question. There was no need for them to be at home because there was no home to be kept. But they were happy to just rest in their feminine. Now, some of these women were, in my opinion, some of the most intelligent, educated women I have ever met. Some of them earning perhaps within the top 3%, sometimes 2% of all the people in the United Kingdom. Attractive, intelligent, great attitudes. Some of them had been educated for 10, sometimes 15 years. But they were willing to toss that out because they said, I want to be a lady of leisure and I want to have a family. Now, for those who want to have 3 kids, irrespective of how they come, if you have them one consecutively, either 1, 2, 3 or 1, 3, 5, you are certainly going to be out of the, you might say, work environment for 10 years. In industries that change every 6 months, it means all that knowledge and all that training is obsolete, completely obsolete. Hence, when those women return back to work, they tend to go into professions that were not consistent with what they studied. So all of that expense, education and training and accreditation, affiliations, wasted. So I usually recommend that, if you come from a family of means, you can start family early, 22, 23, perfectly fine, providing you choose someone who is very mature. I'll talk about age gap dating very soon. But you want someone much older because you're exchanging your value and it has to be a fair exchange. If you're 22 getting married to someone who's 24, as a woman, you have to be in my opinion, insane without comprehension. Take it from me. Love does not get the job done. Love is a feeling. Feelings change. People change. Seasons come. The love will fade. You need something more than love. You need wisdom. And you need a man who has the wisdom and who can lead. Very important. As you move towards 27, you can reduce the age gap because you want someone who is, I guess, ahead of you in terms of who's had the lived experience and actually can guide the family, and someone you can respect and honor. But at the same time, you want someone who has an experience not too dissimilar from you. But also, the truth is, your value is decreasing as a woman. So you effectively have to settle for what you can get. Now, I've explained all of that to simply make a point, which is, there is nothing in starting early if you meet the right man, and then getting all the family affairs done in terms of reproduction, and then beginning your career. Because that way you don't have the morning sicknesses, you're not waking up to feed the babies. The focus is not actually about the kids. You're not seen as just a mother. The kids have got to a stage where they're now in preschool or school years. And then you could have an entire working day to yourself so that you're not overworked as a mother and expected to be a lover and expected to be a worker at the same time. You've done the motherly duties. You can then go back into education. Go straight into your career, which would mean that there will be so much more relevance. There won't be an obsoleteness to the knowledge that you acquired had you done it the traditional way. Now, I've given you a lot. I have given you a lot. I think I should stop here. In the next session, I will expand on this. There's still much to say. I had about 10 things to give you, but I haven't, and I'm respectful of your time. And I don't want this to be a marathon session, so I should stop. But I would move into the next session and expand on some of the things that I think could make your relationship and dating experience more successful. Men are very easy if you understand the lingo of men. Very easy. Sometimes I marvel at women who don't understand men. Women think we are complicated. No, we are meat and potatoes. We're simple. Men can choose a football team from age 6 and still support the same team at age 86. We're very simple. Women who struggle are women who do not understand how men think, or who have been conditioned to reject a man's perspective. Women who have gone into the mantra and ideology of empowerment and see men as enemies. Most of these women have never had a loving, real relationship with a man, either a father or a brother, a friend or lover, and therefore they have this, I guess, subconscious animosity towards the masculine frame. And so some of the things I'm sharing will be rejected heavily. All I'm simply trying to do is teach you how men think. If you understand how men think, here is the word. You can influence men positively. And I hope you will do it positively. If you understand how men think, you can coexist meaningfully with men. If you understand how men think and what we want, you can have a successful relationship with us. You can have a long-standing relationship with men if you are willing to learn, to take heed, and to apply some of the knowledge. It's been a lot. I hope today's session has been of some value.